Back in September of 2012, I was 22 years old and trying to finish my degree in Bloomington, Indiana. Money was tight, and I needed a job that wouldn't interfere with classes. That's how I ended up at the Harold Whitmore Library, working evening shifts as a part-time assistant. The place had been around for more than a century, a tall stone building with long hallways and high ceilings that seemed to swallow sound. During the day, it was bustling with students, researchers, and kids from the local schools. But at night, especially after 9, it emptied out fast. By the time I finished my shift around midnight, the library felt like a different world. My job was simple: reshelve returns, straighten tables, and lock up the basement stacks. The first week, I actually enjoyed the quiet. It gave me time to think. But it didn't take long before I realized there was something different about this building when the lights dimmed and the last visitors left. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. Every cough from the vents echoed through the aisles. My footsteps sounded too loud on the tile floor. Sometimes when I stopped to push a cart of books into place, I could swear I heard another set of footsteps fading just ahead of me. At first, I blamed it on nerves. The building was old after all. Pipes rattled, lights buzzed. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't completely alone. That first week, I started leaving 10 minutes early whenever I could, just to get out into the cool night air. I told myself I was being silly, yet even then, part of me wondered if the job was worth it. By the second week, I started noticing things that didn't add up. It was small at first. I'd straighten chairs before leaving for the night, only to come back the next evening and find them pulled out again. Not one or two, but entire rows, as if people had been sitting there long after closing. Books, too. Sometimes, after shelving a cart, I'd pass through the same aisle 10 minutes later and notice a volume out of place, lying flat on top of the others. It wasn't just clumsiness. The library used the Dewey Decimal System, and some of the books ended up in completely wrong sections. Once, a copy of Modern Physics turned up in the children's corner. The basement was the worst. The lights there were on sensors, meant to switch on when someone walked through. But half the time I'd step into the stairwell and hear a buzzing glow already humming below, as if the lights had turned on for someone else. When I checked, the aisles were empty, stretching into darkness. I tried to brush it off. Libraries are strange places at night, I told myself. Old buildings creak, drafts move things around. But there were moments I couldn't explain away. Like the night I heard a cough echo down from the archives. Not a pipe rattling, not the wind. A human cough, low and unmistakable. When I froze at the top of the stairs, the sound didn't repeat. The silence pressed in heavier than before. I considered quitting right then. But the job paid enough to cover rent, and Bloomington wasn't overflowing with opportunities for students like me. So I kept showing up, shelving books and locking up the aisles, pretending not to notice the patterns forming around me. What I didn't know was that those patterns were leading to something much darker, a name I would soon see written over and over again. One Tuesday night in mid-September, I was finishing up shelving the last cart when I noticed the visitor sign-in book left open on the front desk. Usually it was tucked away, but that night the page caught my eye. The log was simple, columns for names, times, and reasons for visiting. I scanned down the list out of habit, recognizing a few student names, but what made me stop was the last entry. Written in sharp, neat letters was the name, H. Wallace. The time was always just before closing, 11:52 p.m. that night. Curious, I flipped back a few pages. The same name appeared again and again. Every single night I worked late, the final signature was always H. Wallace. At first I thought it was some kind of prank, maybe a bored student messing around. But when I mentioned it to one of the senior staff members the next afternoon, their face immediately stiffened. "Don't joke about that," she said quietly, glancing toward the stacks. Harold Wallace was a head librarian here. He died in this building years ago. I tried to laugh it off, but she didn't smile. Instead, she added, "If you're smart, you'll stop working nights alone." Then she walked away, leaving me staring at the desk, my pulse in my throat. That evening, when I set my card aside to lock up, I passed the sign-in sheet again. Fresh ink glistened under the desk lamp. H. Wallace, 11:53 p.m. The entry hadn't been there an hour earlier. The pen was still resting on the page. The following Friday, I volunteered to close up by myself. Part of me wanted to prove it was all just in my head, that the entries in the logbook were some weird mistake, or a prank I hadn't figured out yet. By 11:30, the library was silent. The last student had left an hour earlier. I pushed my cart through the stacks, forcing myself to stay calm. Still, every squeak of the wheels felt too loud, like it was echoing into places I couldn't see. Around midnight, I turned into one of the basement aisles and stopped dead. A shadow moved at the far end, sliding smoothly across the shelves. My first thought was that someone had snuck in, but the motion sensors never triggered. The light stayed dim, flickering slightly. My chest tightened. I stepped back, pressing myself against the wall of books. Heart pounding, I listened. A soft sound drifted through the aisle, the scrape of a shoe, the brush of fabric. It was deliberate. Slowly, the shadow reappeared, crossing into the next aisle. I caught a glimpse of something pale, like the edge of a sleeve or a hand. Whoever, or whatever it was, seemed to be running their fingers along the spines of the books, as though searching for something specific. I stayed frozen, barely breathing, until the sound faded into silence. When I finally dared to move, I walked quickly to the stairwell. The logbook still sat open on the front desk, and my blood ran cold when I saw fresh ink. H. Wallace, 12:02 a.m. The pen was still resting on the line. The next afternoon, after another sleepless night, I finally worked up the nerve to talk to security. The guard on duty, a tired-looking guy in his 50s named Miller, raised an eyebrow when I asked about reviewing the overnight footage. "You think someone's breaking in?" he asked. I hesitated. "Something like that." He sighed, but pulled up the recordings. Together we watched the grainy black and white feeds of the basement from the night before. I leaned forward, heart pounding, waiting for the moment I'd seen with my own eyes. But the aisle was empty. The timestamp hit 12:01 a.m. The exact time I remembered seeing the shadow. And yet, on the screen, nothing moved. No shadow, no flicker, nothing but still shelves and dim light. Then the camera angle switched to another aisle, catching me in frame. I saw myself freeze, eyes wide, staring down the row as if I were watching something. I stayed locked in that stance for nearly a minute before backing away, pale and shaking. But I wasn't staring at anything. Miller watched silently for a moment before muttering, "You're not the first to see him." When I turned, confused, he just shook his head. "Wallace, people still talk about him. Staff, students, guards. They've all had nights like yours. Always in September, always close to midnight." I didn't know what to say. That evening I walked past the library from across the street. Through the tall windows, the stacks looked calm and silent. But I couldn't help imagining a figure drifting between the aisles, tracing a hand along the books, looking for something only he understood. I never worked another closing shift again.